Ken Wargenden, thanks so very much from the SNY Sam McKee Memorial set here at Meadowlands Racing and Entertainment. It's time to go in the Sulky. I'm Dave Little, and I'm joined by Linda Toscano. Linda, thanks for spending a couple of minutes with us. Congratulations on a huge week last week, culminating with a win in the Meadowlands Pace. But on the Sunday before, you were enshrined at the Harness Racing Museum and Hall of Fame in Goshen, New York. That must have been a great night for you.
It was incredible. It's one of those things that you just can't dream. You know, when you start this and you find a career that you like, I don't think anyone that does it with a Hall of Fame career in mind. So, I mean, I've just done what I love, and it was an awesome night.
Yeah, it certainly was. It was a pretty long night, too. We had 8 inductees that night, but clearly it was a wonderful night for all parties included. Your speech was fantastic. You really did a great job. But, you know, we want to get right into it because we have so much to cover with you. I want to talk all about Linda, and I want to start with, you were born in Brooklyn. How does a girl from Brooklyn end up in harness racing?
That's funny. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. I had bus passes, and I could ride a subway. I could do all that kind of stuff. And the neighborhood started to turn a little bit. So my parents, for our safety, moved out to the suburbs. So my wings were clipped. Once we got out to the subway, they tried, how about this, how about that? Finally, somebody said, I think my mom said, why don't you take horseback riding lessons? I said, that sounds interesting, which led to a friend who was working at the racetrack, and that's how it happened. And
that's how it all leads there. Now, the road then led you to working for Buddy Reagan, and you know, we asked some of our Twitter followers if they had some questions for you. MSZ asks, did working for Buddy Reagan help you have a Hall of Fame career, and what are some of the things you learned from Buddy?
Oh, absolutely. There's so many things. Buddy was a common sense horse trainer. He used to say all the time, you just have to be smarter than the horse. He believed in a horse being comfortable in their equipment. He believed in doing less. He was probably one of the first trainers that utilized a farm as part of a training regimen. He would always have a big training stable, and then after they raced, they'd go out to the farm for a few days. That was kind of not done back then. And he was just a good all-around horseman.
So you had you learned the bona fides from Buddy Reagan, and then you branched out. You had Giant Mermaid, you had Jetlog. How much of an impact did those horses have on your career?
Well, I think what happened was once I kind of went on my own, I went the normal way. We did claimers. We started out that way, and I claimed a horse by the name of Storm Dust. He wound up Sports Eye Claimer of the Year, and he won 16 races. That led to the Three Brothers stable calling me because they had his little sister, and they sent her to me, and that was my first stake win, which then led to me buying my first 2-year-old. Once I started buying the 2-year-olds, that was my wheelhouse. That's what I loved.
Oh, so you love working with the younger horses, but clearly that led to some really good horses down the road. But, you know, I have some more questions for you from the Twitterverse. Susan asked, what about preparation for different racetracks? Do you have to do different things for the different size tracks and the different surfaces?
Absolutely. All the racetracks are different. Some are hard, some are soft, some are both. Trotters will go, you can take them down to the Red Mile. You might be able to race them barefoot. There's no question. You know, sometimes you'll take their hobbles up. Sometimes you'll leave them alone. That also plays into whether or not a horse's gait comes into effect, you know, whether the track is soft, whether the track is loose, you know, if it's a muddy night. Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned this during your speech on Hall of Fame night a week ago Sunday, and you spoke about the elephant in the room, I believe it was, and it's the fact that you were the first woman enshrined as a trainer into the Hall of Fame, and that's something that more or less that you've poo-pooed through the years, but you didn't, because you didn't want to be known as just the girl in the Hall of Fame. But the fact of the matter is, it is a very special accomplishment.
No question about it. I mean, I always try to belittle it, but I'm very proud of it all at the same time. I wanted to be a good trainer. I didn't want to be a good girl trainer. So I used to set the bar higher and higher for myself, and I'm pretty tough on myself. So I think that's the reason that I've always kind of gone against the gender thing. But there's no question that if I could be just a little bit of a role model to somebody who wants to do this, the sky's the limit.
In a male-dominated sport, I mean, it's very true. Even if you influenced 1 or 5 or 10 young women to become trainers, that can have a huge impact.
Women are great with horses. There's no question about it. We have a special bond with a horse. And I said that in my speech because it's true. They made movies about it, whether it was Elizabeth Taylor in Beating the Boys with the Pie, or whether, going back to April Love. So I think we're good with him. Opportunity was not always there. I was very, very fortunate. I started in the metropolitan area working for guys like Buddy Regan, traveling on the road with Stanley Dancer's crew. I was fed horses when I went on my own by Ted Wing and John Campbell. So I was incredibly fortunate, but I think the opportunity did not exist then that possibly does now.
What about some of the big horses that you've had? We call these Toscanos Titans. Your 2012 was one of the best years a trainer's ever had. Market Share, Heston Blue Chip, and Chapter 7. How did it all come together? You had those three in 1 year.
I don't know. I think I was kidding around beforehand. I started out the year by buying a raffle ticket, and I won a trip to Paris for the SRF. And I said, the joke is if you win a trip to Paris, you're going to have a good year. But those horses were very, very special horses. Chapter 7 was probably one of the most talented horses I've ever been fortunate enough to train. Market Share was not gifted as an athlete, but his desire was second to none. And Heston Blue Chip was a pleasure to train. He was just a good horse, and everything came together for those horses.
Now, we want to get to the Meadowlands pace, but we have to have a quick hit on Wallner. Was there a grave disappointment that you had when he couldn't go on to complete what appeared to be a Hamiltonian type of season?
Probably the biggest disappointment of my life. I mean, I know, and possibly I'm maybe the only one who really, truly knows how great a horse Wallner was. So when he suffered an injury, it wasn't a devastating injury, but it was certainly an injury that could have hurt him by racing him in the Hamiltonian, and the decision not to race him was really a hard one, but it was the right one.
Well, I tell you, Linda, let's end this with something on a very positive note. Let's take a look at the stretch run of last Saturday's $682,000 Crawford Farms Meadowlands Pace. There's Brian Sears sitting fourth right now. What do you think about your chances right here?
I watched the half come up. I saw the three-quarters come up. I saw Timmy tip out, which I think he was supposed to do. He had dead aim. And then I saw Brian duck down to the rail, and I said, oh, my goodness, this could possibly happen. It was literally one of the most exciting races that I've ever been in, because I thought my colt was good, but possibly not good enough to win. His owner and I had talked about it, and we knew that our colt was going to show up, but we were hoping for a real good piece of it.
Just an amazing thing. And the thing of it is, you had Bob McClure driving the horse previously, but to pick up Brian Sears was obviously great, but at the same time, you felt bad for Bob, didn't you?
Absolutely. Bob has done an incredible job with this colt. He's seasoned him. He's taught him up in Canada. He's done absolutely everything right. And the week before, I was stuck on a tarmac and couldn't get up to Canada, so I know exactly how he must have felt. And kudos to Bob. We talked about it, and he even agreed that Brian should finish the job. So it was kind of cool for everybody involved.
And before we get out, what do we see down the road for Best in Show?
Well, fortunately for Best in Show, he's eligible to the Ontario Sire Stakes, so he'll head back north again, and then after that we'll make decisions. He's eligible to everything towards the end of the year. We're going to certainly point him towards Breeders' Crown, and hopefully we can do it again.
Linda Toscano, Hamiltonian champion trainer, Meadowlands Pace champion trainer, and now Hall of Fame trainer. Linda, thanks so much for spending a few minutes.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. In 60 seconds, Dave Brower's going to jump in Linda's chair. We'll give out this week's hardware for Trainer and Driver of the Week and talk about tonight's featured action.